Welcome everybody to today's session. We're going to be talking about 3 ways IT leaders are doubling down on enterprise service management. I'm Isaac Sikolik. I'm the president of Star CIO. I have a book out called Driving Digital that you can see behind me. And I do a lot of speaking and writing about digital transformation, DevOps, Agile, and really bringing collaborative practices to the entire enterprise. A little bit about today's webinar, just some housekeeping. Yes, we are recording this webinar and we will make the recording available to you and others who want to learn more about enterprise service management. So just want you to be aware of that. We also have plenty of time at the end to answer your questions. And your questions could be about enterprise service management. It could be about Jira service management, about Jira in general. So, let us filter things if we're going off topic. But we have an expert here from a non-IT function here. We have an expert, 2 experts from IT, and we have an Atlassian expert. So feel free to ask your questions. Now today, as I mentioned, we're going to be speaking about enterprise service management and 3 ways to double down. And I want to talk a little bit about what that means. Many of you are IT service management heroes, and you've built up using platforms to handle requests and managing incidents and handling standard operating procedures. But today's world is a lot different than where we grew up and when we set up service management platforms in IT. We're doing a lot more collaboration with other departments. There's a lot more hybrid working going on where people are in the office and some people are working remotely. And what that basically means is things that we could have done in the office through emails and through meetings and through just visiting people's desks and phone calls. We're now putting up more tools and more technology to make it more transparent. How do I send a request to a department? How does a department know what work to work on? How do you keep status updates in terms of where your department is in fulfilling requests? And most importantly, we want to make sure that when we put tools up today, they are truly self-service, meaning that the organization and the department that we're working with can actually build their workflow, build their terminology, and manage their workflow based on what their requirements are. And that's self-service, and that's a big part of what enterprise service management's about. It's taking all the things that you've been doing inside IT to handle requests and handle incidents and handle standard operating procedures and saying, how do we bring this to the rest of the organization? How do we use common tools? And how do we create a collaboration that works across the enterprise? So I have 3 great speakers today that are joining me that will give their perspectives on enterprise service management. First up is Mitch Cardwell. Mitch is the VP of Brand Identity and Systems over at CBS. Hello, Mitch. Say hello to everybody. There he is.
Hi, everybody. Turning my camera and video on. Mitch Cardwell. Nice to meet you all.
Great, Mitch. And second up is Kathy Davey. She's a senior solutions engineer over at Atlassian. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, everybody.
Great. And Ian Cooperman. Ian is a strategic account manager over at ISOS Technology. Hello, Ian.
Hey, everyone. Glad to be here.
Yes, and this webinar is brought to you by ISOS Technology, by Atlassian, and by my company, Star CIO. So let's just get started. And to kick this off, I really want to start with Mitch. Mitch, I want to hear a little bit about your background in using service management. For those who did not pick that up, Mitch is in the marketing department, and he's talking about service management. He's using Atlassian's tools to do this. So tell us a little bit about your story of how you ended up thinking about services and then moving over to the Atlassian tool to support it.
Sure, Isaac, thanks. So I work at CBS, the TV network that hopefully everyone knows and loves. And we were going through some transformation over the last 3 or 4 years, where we had discovered that a lot of our processes had just grown too complex. Departments were feeding intake forms back and forth with each other. Media buys, which is, when a department, we have a department that purchases ads, both on cable networks and the social media networks and places like that. and they were sending those down through the other departments in very disparate ways. And there was a lot of miscommunication. Nobody was using consistent forms. We discovered that people weren't even using similar taxonomy for talking about metadata. So we realized that we reached a point where we needed help, and we needed to unify our naming conventions and our processes and our workflows. And that's when we found out about ISOs, and then ISOs led us to Jira, and then Jira led us to Jira Service Management to start to process external intake. And so that allowed us to take our team of about 240 people on both coasts, and now, of course, we're all remote workers, and create unified language, unified processes, a lot of automation, and consistency across how we process all that information through our organization.
Mitch, maybe tell me a little bit more of the story about, I'm doing a media buy and what's happening behind the scenes to enable that workflow that your department is working through.
Yeah, with a media buy, that's a great example, because that is that's an Excel spreadsheet. And it starts over at an ad agency, and they always lay it out in Excel, and then it comes into our media, it comes into our media agency as an Excel spreadsheet, and then they authorize the buy, and then that Excel spreadsheet would be put into another Excel spreadsheet. And that's where things would start to get us into trouble, because a spot has a beginning and an end. So what's called flight begins and flight ends. And that can be referenced in many different ways, different date formats, 2 metadata fields, a single metadata field with a hyphen, and things like that. And then that information gets sent down into multiple departments, because a creative department actually makes the creative, and then a production department actually does the technical part of making the ad unit or making the ad or like that. And then when those two departments come to fuse their information together, it sometimes gets mismatched. So what Ian and I did over a long period of time in discovery is we created a process where all that information is in a unified format. So the creative, and we use things like issue linking to let the creative team know what the production team was working on through issue linking, so that the creative could see immediately what they needed to output, and the production department could see what was coming from the creative team, and media planning could watch it all from above. And then we created a whole set of visual display methodologies to let everybody see all that in a very coherent manner.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. I mean, I wanted to bring that to the group because, a lot of work concepts start that way. They sound like, oh, I just send in a document in an email to a group, and it's got all bits and pieces and parts to it. But we see this in design, in IT when we're doing user experience. We see it in software development with a requirement coming in. We certainly see it in infrastructure. Somebody wants a server or service set up, and you got to open firewall ports up. You got to set storage up, and all of a sudden your one little request has a number of different people that need to collaborate. And hopefully we're doing this efficiently, and hopefully we're keeping it transparent so that the people who have requested the work know what the overall status is, right? And we're not making them into project managers. So Kathy, a lot of similarities in IT and even in marketing around, one request turns into a lot of work. Can you just give me a sense of, other marketing departments that are using Atlassian tools? What are some of the things that you're advising them in terms of their workflows?
Sure, it's exactly what you described. So, we've got people that are doing webinar and conference requests like this. We use it internally for our marketing team. That's how I got here. Content proofing, campaigns, and it makes sense because if you think of like a new product launch, you want to organize that and coordinate that with the marketing team, right? Make sure that as I'm putting out this new cool feature, that we've got all the proper campaigns and webinars and swag going out all around that. And what's great, like Mitch just referred to, is as the work comes in, we use Jira Service Management as that intake portal, and then it can get sent out to the teams and they can work the way that makes sense for them. So if it's Kanban, if it's Scrum, Trello boards, they can follow their own practices, but it's giving that visibility across the entire project.
Yep. I mean, I love hearing that because, what's worse than having to send emails everywhere to get work done? It's like going to 10 or 12 different intake forms in different tools. You don't know where they start and end from. And now all of a sudden I have to project manage all these different departments so that, they're doing the work in different areas. And so that's the intake side of it. Mitch, I want to shift to actually getting work done. And I was fascinated by this. Every time I hear a marketing department is using Agile to get their work done. And I think it's, in some ways, Agile is even better for marketing departments than software departments. So tell me how you're using Agile in your department.
Yeah, so following up on what Kathy said, that's one of the things that one of the key things we've discovered is there's the intake, and then the intake is a common format, and then we have teams that work different ways. And when Ian and I started this, our deployment of Jira was done with Agile methodology, and as we went along, I was like, oh, well, wait a minute. It's like these sprints, we have a post-production department, and post-production runs usually in a 2 shifts on a day. So 8 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock at night. And as we started talking about how Agile works and how sprinting works, I was like, well, our production day is a sprint. And Ian and team were like, no, that's crazy. Sprints are 2 weeks. And I said, no, wait a minute. I know that's true. I was like, but it's planned, it's started, it has a finite number of items that are going to be accomplished, it's completed, and then you do a retrospective and you generate reports. And so we started to come around to that idea. So we actually run our post-production department, which makes promos and commercials, using Agile methodology, and they plan out 2 weeks, 10 sprints over 2 weeks. And they drop their widgets or their commercials into those sprints. And that's how they plan out their scheduling using Agile methodology, and then start the sprint. And then ISOS and Ian's team spent a huge amount of time. It was a big part of our development process, was to develop how do we generate the reports that we need, because they're a little unique because it's post-production. And we built all the music reporting is a great example. All of our music goes into all that post-production information, and then we have to pay out the musicians. And so we built an entire process to, here's all the music we used on Tuesday to make spots. Here's how you pay out the musicians. And so we literally do ASCAP music reporting based on a sprint. And it's tied into a music database. So we pull all the knowledge from that music database and generate a report, and it goes off to billing and goes out. Now we have other teams, like our design teams. The design teams work Kanban. It's just an endless stream of work. Our creative teams work Kanban. So you see that situation where we've got some teams sprinting, and we've got some teams running Kanban, and then all that flows together in a very coherent way. And that is hidden to the media planning department and hidden to the external intake people that are giving us intake requests, because they don't need to see that. They don't have to, they just need to know their request is in process. And so it allowed, that's what Jira Service Enterprise Service Management allow us to do, is to have all these different workflows that match the team and how they want to work. And that can be hidden from the customer.
Yeah, and like I said, there's a ton of analogies there. I know IT departments, departments that are doing a lot of support work. They tend to, a lot of small things, small enhancements, small fixes. They tend to use Kanban to manage their flow, and then others that are doing a lot of work that, you got to manage requirements, you got to manage deployment cycles. There's a creative aspect. They tend to move to sprints, and much like Ian said, moving into 1 or 2 week sprints to be able to do those things. And you're using 12-hour production workflows in sprints, which is it still fits the process, it still fits the tool. You found a way to make it work, but it's not a one size fits all. And so, Ian, I want to bring the conversation over to you. You've been working with Mitch and CBS for a long time. What has ISO's done to make this really a successful partnership in rolling out these tools and processes there?
Yeah, well, Isaac, it all starts with listening, right? Listening is an art, right? It's a skill that takes time to develop. Just ask anyone that has a kid. Everyone has a natural tendency to, partially listen to the problem and immediately move to a solution. And this is usually a challenge that consultants like me face. We're experts in our field, so it's typical that you'll see some consultants jump to a solution too quickly without really understanding the whole problem. So what I think went well with CBS is that we took the time to listen to their pain points and didn't immediately assume a solution. We listened to, their challenges, right? Like what Mitch has been talking about, their use of a legacy tool and the challenges there, challenges with, disconnected, siloed teams. And then we talked about their objectives and what the future state looks like in their minds. So, after getting past the listening part, we got very prescriptive. We take what's shared and get it on paper to come up with a solution. And then work with CBS to help them understand the direction we're going in. And then we iterated. We very much believe at ISO's the concept of failing fast. If we don't, then we end up spending a lot of time on a solution that might not actually solve the problem. So that's why we focus on batching our work into smaller segments, kind of like an agile format, right? Where we can demo what we've accomplished on a weekly basis. And so this kept us and CBS pretty synced up and working towards the same end goal. So those three things, listening, being prescriptive, iterating, that created a strong relationship and I think made us very successful at CBS.
Yeah, I want to pick out two words you said, Ian, that's so important here. The first part is obviously listening. Everybody on this webinar in some way has a job of solutioning. And so we tend to listen this month and just go right into the implementation. And when you're doing enterprise service management, you really have to listen to, what does Mitch need? What problem is he trying to solve for? How many people are involved? Where's the collaboration happening? So there's a lot of partnership happening there. And then in doing so, Ian, forming a relationship, right? We're not just throwing technology over the fence and expecting it to work. We're building a relationship with the marketing department. We're finding out how to apply technologies to make them successful. And that really gets to our first point around doubling down, right? What you heard here is a pattern. Set up some common tools for dealing with intake so that people in the enterprise know how to request work from marketing or from legal or from facilities or from finance, and then use the right form for the type of work that they're doing, centralize those intakes, and then allow each department, each team, depending on how you're organized, come back and say, we're going to follow a Kanban process, or we're going to follow an ITSM process, or maybe we're going to follow an Agile Scrum process, and let that flow into how they're operating. So that's how you start doubling down on your implementation. Now let's move on to a second area, and that area that I find every department and organization has to work through is knowledge management. There's a couple of sides to this. There's the external side, so that people across the organization know how to work with that department, how to feed information, what's the format that you want, what's the language that you're using. And then there's the internal side of knowledge management in terms of what your standards are and how you're operating and what to expect and what to set of standards in terms of your delivery. Now, when I talk knowledge management with a lot of different teams, what I hear is, we have a file system and you can insert whatever technology that you want in there, but we put it up on this site, on this cloud file storage system. And before you know it, there's a folder with lots of other folders with lots of files. And I don't know where to look for my information. And I don't know how this is updated when people want to evolve standards. So Kathy, help me out here. What are we doing wrong? What are some better ways of not only just creating knowledge systems for our teams, but being able to use that in a collaborative way with our customers and our end users?
Sure, and we hear the same problems, right? So that's why we recommend Confluence. So if you're not familiar with Confluence, it's actually built right into our platform. It's a collaborative knowledge sharing space. that can link directly to your intake work, your requests, your incidents, problems, changes. And from that perspective, now you don't have to go worry about, do I have the latest copy? Do I need to go find it in Slack or email or wherever it lives? You're always going to have that live copy. And if you think about it, I'll give you a change management example. So for change planning, there's all kinds of information that you need to gather, and it often comes from many different people. But now you have this live collaborative space where you can mention people, you can tag people. You're actually not just say, go look at this document, but go look right here in this document, and I need you to comment on this bit. So, having all of those details allows you not to lose any context as it flows through that whole change process and onto software development and then later out to release. It's all transparent, right? So it's all there for people. If somebody's out on vacation, you're not coming to a screeching halt. It's just way much more maintainable.
Yeah, I agree. I remember I first saw my first wiki used in IT. It was over 20 years ago now. And it was sort of eye-awakening because all the information was connected. You can go from one page to the next in terms of information flow. You sent new employees to one page as a starting point. And when something changed, right, you went into that page, you made an update to it, it kept a version of it, and people knew what the latest and greatest standard. So Mitch, tell us how you're doing this in practice over at CBS.
Yeah, I would, it's interesting. I would have, as we started the process, I sort of looked at Confluence as an afterthought, and boy, I was wrong about that. And it has really become the heart of knowledge management for our marketing team. One place I'll give an example is technical specs or technical and delivery specifications for ad units. So again, building like a 300 by 250 display ad in HTML5, there are several pages of tech specs around that. When you create an ad, a commercial or a promo, every one of the vendors has a different delivery spec. Social media networks are incredibly complex in terms of their ad units, aspect ratios, file formats. Facebook alone has 12, 15 different ad units that you can use across just for video. So, that information used to be on a tab in the Excel spreadsheet that came down from media planning. And that information was pasted there by an ad buyer who's not a technologist at all. And that information would become disconnected from the delivery spec because it's living in a spreadsheet. So what we do now is we maintain a wiki in Confluence of all the ad units that we use. And when you send down a media plan, or when you're going to do a unit of video, say for Facebook, that Jira issue is linked to that Confluence page. And so in the post-production environment, when they're in the evening and they're trying to figure out what's the aspect ratio and do I make an MP4 file of this and what's the bit rate of that, they reference the Confluence document. And that document is constantly updated by the experts inside our team that know what the delivery specs of those ad units are. So that's one way we use it. We also use it to generate a lot of our playbook, how we get things done. So obviously we maintain multiple playbooks across every one of our teams. So if you need to learn how to do something, you're pointed to a place in Confluence and it's, here's how we make an ad, and that's a complex process. We also use it for reporting. So since we're generating all this or tracking all this work in Jira, we now do quite a lot of our status reports in Confluence, so they become live documents. And I'll use it myself as an example. I'm one of 3 groups in our brand team, and each one of the teams inside brand maintains a status page in Confluence, and then those 3 pages roll up into another page, which is just the brand team, and that gives our senior leadership a single point of reference to look and see what the status of all the projects are. And we created this method of how we get epics and issues in Jira and tickets and service management and other information they knew we would convey to just automatically bubble up there, and then we rank it using the Kanban board, and it automatically organizes it the way we need it in Confluence. It saves a huge amount of time. And then the final way we use it from the brand team is we maintain our brand standards there. So those are always constantly changing. We'll tweak a color or change a font or change how we structure a promo. We have beginning, middles, and ends of our promos, and we put that in Confluence. And again, that immediately surfaces it to the creative team, then to the production teams, and to our media planning team, so everyone understands what something is supposed to look like. And that becomes the Bible of how you generate something that stays within the CBS brand.
Mitch, I love this answer because, we started from, we said, intake forms, standardize one place to go to them, that helps abstract out how customers work with you and inbound work with you with how you're operating. And now you're talking about using Confluence as a way to simplify communications and outbounds, right? You're not going to send everybody to Jira and say, well, here are the 30 stories and 15 tickets that are happening across 5 teams to get this ad media buy completed. Here's, a roll-up status in a tool you can look at in near real time with a human English update to it. You're not having a bunch of people create PowerPoints around this or separate spreadsheets. It's all happening within the ecosystem. And I love that. And that gets to our second area of where teams can double down. It's really around communications and collaborations, right? Communications in terms of broadcasting where you are, collaboration so other teams know what your procedures are, they can learn them, they know what your standards are, and then your internal standard operating procedure. When you think about bringing on new employees and they're trying to understand how to work with you, what are your standards, how are you operating, what's your terminology, and you're creating a way of working that is sustainable. I want to remind everybody that we are taking questions at the end. We're about halfway through. So if you heard something that sparked your interest, please put your question in the question box. We're going to try to get to as many of them today as we can. And I will commit to getting some writing to you if we don't answer them today. So thank you for that. So let's talk about enterprise service management now. We talked about intakes. We talked about way of working. We talked about collaborating and setting standards. What are we really talking about when we use the word enterprise? Is it just IT and marketing, or is there more to this? And Kathy, give us some other examples of how customers of Atlassian are using Jira Service Management in other areas of the enterprise.
Sure. You actually mentioned one of the other most common one, which is HR. So having ask HR questions, ask questions about their benefits, policies, onboarding and offboarding is also a really big one. And that makes sense because it's what we were talking about of collaborating across different teams. So it's not just how do I onboard them into the HR systems, but how do I get them IT equipment? How do I work with facilities to make sure it's shipped, especially in this remote world we're in right now? It's having all of those different activities and tasks be spawned from that one initial onboarding. So, being able to orchestrate all of those processes. So HR is a big one. We see the same thing in like legal service desks. So making sure people are getting the right files and, for different cases that they're actually trying. We see that for SecOps. So managing any security violations or policies, or even just making sure people are doing their compliance training, all kinds of different areas. So it's definitely not just IT.
Thanks, Kathy. And Ian, some of these are very standard processes, onboarding, for example. What drives me crazy is when IT has its onboarding and security has its onboarding and HR has its onboarding and finance has its onboarding. So bringing this all together makes a lot of sense to me. What about the things that don't fall into one of these channels? What have you implemented with some of your clients?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about what we've done internally, right? So a couple of years back, ISOS noticed a problem. We had a lot of our employees, like most employees, that had some great ideas on how to improve things like process and service offerings, culture, except you name it. But we didn't have a centralized way to capture those ideas and get them to the right teams for validation, prioritization, implementation, those sorts of things. So I think everyone can attest to this. I've been on countless meetings where a great idea was brought up, And then it just fell by the wayside, right? And never actioned against. And so to solve that, we came up with the idea of using the customer portal that's part of Jira Service Management. And we created this great ideas portal. We gave it a cheesy name called Ninja Desk, but it's a simple form that allowed anyone in the organization to submit their ideas. And then, it would get triaged to the respective team that has ownership over it, and then prioritized and executed against. So the cool thing about this setup is that when that idea came in and went through its life cycle, the individual that submitted the idea would get updated on what was accomplished so far on that idea. So, and there's many ways we can slice the value here, right? Employee confidence that they're actually being heard, right? So they're seeing results. Great ideas that in the past were never worked on and now are actively being worked on or even implemented. And then we can have metrics showing the successes and visibility into who submitted those and what happened. So a lot of cool value here. I think the coolest part to me is that this really had no impact on existing processes or teams, right? We came up with an idea of how to use ESM within the Atlassian tools, and we basically put it and attached it to an existing process. And so this thing has now evolved. I mean, today, what Kathy was talking about, like today, we have ops, finance, marketing, HR, they're all using that same portal for requests. So it's really pretty neat to see that evolution that started with just a simple implementation.
Ian, I love this because it's the replacement of the water cooler where all the great ideas are discussed, but never get implemented, right? Because everybody went back to their desk, and now I'm a new employee, I'm hybrid working. I don't know who to talk to, but I have this great idea for CVS. And now there's maybe they go and create a portal around some of this. But Mitch, on the more practical side, COVID hits, remote working hits, hybrid hits, and it surfaces a whole bunch of places where you guys have to think about creating new workflow to support things that you could have done pre-COVID. So what are some of those examples where now you have the tools to be able to go rapidly evolve something like that?
Yeah, it seems so trivial, but office supplies was a big one for us. And pre-COVID, you wander down to the accounting department and there was someone who handled office supplies, and that went out the door when we all went out the door. And so we quickly spun up a service desk to allow people to just order their office supplies and then get them shipped to their home. And now that's just, normal for us. Another one that was driven by the pandemic was time cards. We had a significant percentage of employees that did a physical time card, and that was just dropped in an inbox in accounting. And we had to very quickly okay, well, how are we going to do time cards? And we did it on a service desk. And then we're like, well, wow, we've got the data in Jira. Can we output this data to payroll? And then, very quickly figured out that we could do that. And we basically automated that payroll process, inside a month, from people filling out their time card to spitting the data to the payroll department. And just circling back on Ian's Ninja Desk, we also, because I run brand for CBS now, we set up a brand portal. Basically, if you see somewhere where the brand's not correct, just step to this portal and fill out a ticket. And so that's how we now have our employees sort of help us self-police the CBS brand, because there's we're spread out all over the country. And if you see something, say something, and we now tackle our brand identity issues using a service desk to simplify that processing of those people raising a red flag.
Thanks, Mitch. I mean, that's really a great all-around answer, Kathy, Ian, Mitch. But when you really think about how do we turn this into a doubling down, we have our tools out there. We're now deploying them in strategic ways, like multi-department workflows, in strategic ways, so how do we build an onboarding process for ideas that are not going to go to any single one place? And how do we do this in very tactical, time in the moment? We need some technology to be able to handle a situation we didn't anticipate. Let's rapidly build a workflow up and that in a user interface with tools that people are used to, and we can handle collaboration and hybrid workflows through this. Now, I want to get into a question here, and Kathy, I think you're the best person to help me with this, right? So we all know departments need technology, we need collaboration, we need workflows, and so we're not going to debate, we need this technology, but someone in the marketing department, maybe Mitch faced this too, is going to say, I want to go buy a SaaS platform, a SaaS tool to do a piece of this. And then maybe somebody in IT, maybe, your company has done acquisitions, you're using Jira, but you also have some other tools in the enterprise and saying, look, we can use another service desk or a BPM piece of software or a low code platform to go service other desks. So, we understand the problem and the need and the opportunity here of bring enterprise service management capabilities. I want to know from Kathy, why are we doing this in Atlassian tools?
So I think when you look at all those other tools, and there's plenty of them out there, they're very capable. It comes down to what you just said of needing to be agile, needing to adapt quickly, and really needing that self-serve function. So, with Mitch's example of marketing, if I'm in IT, I may not understand the nuances of his process and in his workflow, or even the fields that need to be on these intake forms. And it's just going to be much faster if he can do it himself, right? So our approach is that we actually believe transformation is iterative. So you need to be able to adapt, right? The tooling has to be owned by the teams. And of course, there's guardrails. So IT can be happy from that perspective, right? We're going to have some standards. There's going to be permissions there. We're not going to break anything, but providing that autonomy and agility for the different teams to actually self-serve and not have to wait and get in line, behind all the other teams that need IT's help to tweak their workflow or tweak their forms. So, from our platform approach, the fact that we can wrap around the way that you work, you can adapt very quickly, you can own that. That's really where our value and strength lie.
Thanks, Kathy. And Mitch, from your perspective, self-service, is this a good thing for you, or would you rather just wait for IT to do the work for you? ISOS comes to you with Jira tool, well known in the IT space, maybe less known in the marketing space. How are you handling that internally?
Yeah, it's been a journey for us, because we've gone from a tendency to have a very exacting, rigid process, and we've learned how to be agile, and that's been what Atlassian and ISOS have helped us through that journey, and having the sense of we will control the metadata fields, so IT sort of keeps control of the taxonomy and the metadata fields, and we will control, something can't be accidentally deleted and stuff like that. But we allow our teams to design their own workflows, and that is what we discovered that we needed. Is our design department, for example, needed to come to us and say, hey, we need to add a step here, and we'd go, okay, let's add that step, and we'd show them how to do it, or we would just do it immediately, knowing that we were safe, that we weren't going to lose anything in that process. And once everyone was like, oh, wow, we can alter our workflow that quickly without having to go to, our friends in IT and put in the change request and, wait 2 weeks for that. We were doing in 6 hours what took weeks or months in our prior methodologies. And, that allowed us to, we realized that the lightweight SaaS products could not do that for us. And the hard-coded things didn't work either, but, Atlassian and hit that really, really sweet spot that would let us work on, have guardrails where we needed them, but make changes in process, and even just, how we visualize the data, very easily.
You know, Mitch, I'm liking what you're saying here because, you know, it always requires some balance. You're telling me, you know, there's centralization of the taxonomy. That makes sense because you're trying to create a common language, but then departments have some freedom to actually manipulate their workflows. And that's going to work very well in a creative department like in marketing. And so, Ian, you know, tell me your perspective on this. What are some of the things that you need to do to make this successful?
Yeah, so what we've seen with most enterprise legacy tools is that they're monolithic, right? They're overly structured. They limit the ability for team level customization. And you know, as Mitch and Kathy have mentioned, and as you know, explaining with the Atlassian tools, that's not the case, right? You have a you know, when you're in these legacy tools, what we've seen is that like that one simple change that should take 5 minutes, you know, it's a really small effort ends up being a much larger effort. And obviously, you know, that's a challenge for the IT teams because now you have business saying you have to edit a field. I don't understand why it's taking 6 weeks to do so. And so you don't get that with the Atlassian tool. As they mentioned, it's, you know, completely customizable. It allows the, you know, IT service management team or the platform owner of that tool to create those standards and structures for how the tool will be used. It also gives the leads of the teams or project administrators the ability to manage configurations and customizations at the team or project level. So as they pointed out, very much a self-service tool enables autonomy at the team level. I'd like to talk about like, why does this matter, right? So what we end up seeing when we have folks that are switching, you know, from these legacy tools to Atlassian tools, is we see at least the discussions that we have with them is like, this thing has sped up our changes, right? You know, if a team lead wants to make a tweak to their Jira workflow or board, they can do that without bugging the platform team that owns it. It reduces IT overhead, right? Less need for a whole bunch of admins, platform admins, you know, because the owner of the Jira projects can manage their own configurations. You know, and then, you know, inevitably that reduces SLAs, right? And even, you know, reduces the tensions between IT and business, because less of those small tweaks are being requested, and that gives more opportunity for, you know, the resources within IT to support the bigger things that come up. So lots of wins that we've seen when organizations move from a legacy tool to an Atlassian tool.
Ian, thank you for that, because, you know, one of the things that I differentiate, you know, when you start talking about a BPM piece of software or even a low code platform, you know, IT is going to own a heavy responsibility around that in terms of the implementation and the support. And so now all of a sudden we're putting a new tool in. I got to pay for that new tool. I got to have people trained on it. I have to get this used. And you know, instead of having maybe 5 or 6 people and things queued up, now what I'm saying is, Mitch, I want to train a few of your people on how to create a workflow or how to customize a screen or build a board out for your workflow. And that just changes the dynamic, right? It changes the way people are working. And we're also using some of the same tools when we start automating things, right? There's one way of automating across a number of different departments. We have the ability to build centers of excellence that help with that automation. I want to remind everybody we're going to be coming to our Q&A section very soon. I do have one last question for my panelists before we get there. Really, you know, maybe you're sold here, you want to bring a JSM or bring ITSM to your marketing department or your legal department or to HR. How do I get this off the ground? And Ian, you must be the expert here. Where are you going to go first when you think about bringing something like this off the ground? And you're working with somebody IT who says, look, I know my team needs this, but how do I get them to listen or to look at this tool or consider a process change here?
I'll say, Isaac, that's the nicest thing you ever said to me, so I appreciate that. Yeah, for us, you know, specifically with CBS, we found a hero, and that is Mitch, right? A champion, someone that's vocal about the challenges that they're running into. You know, find that champion, find that person that's yelling the loudest on the business side. You know, the thing that we do internally, like when I'll reach out to Thad, our CEO, and say, hey, there's a problem. He's like, well, what's the solution? And how are you going to fix it? Right. So he brings it back. And I think that's a good culture, is like, you know, finding those people that, you know, complain the loudest and work with them, because obviously they are very, very passionate about it. And then, as we talked about earlier, it starts with listening, you know, to their current pain points, and then helping them find those solutions. So again, what worked well at CBS is we had that visionary in Mitch, that understood the challenges, has a vision of the future state. And he spoke our language, which was great. You don't find that too much from marketing. No offense to all the marketing people on this call, but he spoke our language, and he also was able to translate that language to their teams and be able to move things forward. So really successful. And I wouldn't say that CBS has been a very highlight of my career, because it's just been a great relationship with them. But a lot of our other engagements are the same way. We have someone on the client side who is a Mitch, not as cool though, but who sees the need and the opportunity for a better ecosystem between the business, IT operations, marketing, et cetera. And so once you have that hero in place, now it's about that failing fast, right? Get things going, start working with these tools, because they're easy to stand up, as we pointed out, they're easy to scale. You can test them quickly to meet those needs. I will say another way that IT leaders can create adoption of these tools is to create visibility of those tools. We've seen, and this works really well because there's value on both sides. We've seen IT teams kind of lure other teams into JSM by requiring that the requesters stop emailing the IT team. Just leave us alone, stop emailing us. We have this beautiful portal that you can go to and submit your request. And when that happens, it sparks that thought, ooh, if you have marketing coming in, ooh, this looks like something that we could definitely use on our side. And so that kind of sparks that adoption, that interest. The thing also that adds value for the IT teams is they're bringing in people to this portal where they have fields, they have information that they're getting from their internal, external clients, and they're able to then be able to complete the work a little bit more quickly because they have that information up front. It's not the back and forth between IT teams and the folks that are asking for things. So yeah, find someone who's passionate on improving their business processes and tooling, and then lure those business teams into the portal and see, that's where we've been able to see success.
But Ian, I also heard you say you like working with people who complain the loudest. Mitch, is that you? You're the
no. I don't know that I certainly work. I've got my fair share of complainers on our team over here. I think I'm not a complainer.
Yeah, but somehow in this, you were able to bring agile and service management into the marketing department. And I'm sure they're looking at this and saying, but we're not IT and we don't work this way. So how did you answer that? I mean, it's one thing for Ian to find you and to sell you on it. You're the hero. What are you doing with your team to get them on board with it?
I think that, to the point that Ian made about how he and I started working together, I had over a long period of time built up a really strong relationship with our head of operations. As a person on the creative side who was empathetic, listened to them, talked with them constructively. And so when the moment came that I raised a hand and said, hey, I think I've got to solve here, I had built that relationship. And they knew that they could trust me to not steer them wrong, because I'd always been listening and trying to always be that bridge. Mm-hmm. And there are still barriers in creative shops such as CBS between IT and marketing. I think those barriers exist across most companies, but especially in the creative industries, there's a perception from the creative side that the IT side doesn't get it, and we, as we went through these processes, and we're like, what, a sprint's a production day? And I'm like, and they were like immediately hostile to that because that's an IT thing, mm-hmm. But then when we, it was again, listening and talking, and gentle change management, and then being willing to always look at it as, we're going to break that and then fix it, and break it and fix it, not break, but iterate, and until we got, and our head of production, who Ian and I worked very closely with, she, at the beginning was very reticent, and now is like, thinks this is the greatest thing in the world, because she had a voice and a hand in the building of it and the rapid iteration that we did every few weeks. over a year until we had our production system set up exactly the way we wanted. And then she knew also, hey, I can make changes to this, because she came along in that journey. And that made her someone who would embrace Agile and embrace the, the willingness to be able to not be afraid to break something, because we can fix it very quickly and iterate a change.
Thanks, Mitch. We're coming up to the end of the hour, and we do have some questions here. So Kathy, I'm going to give you the last word on this. You're working with IT leaders like everybody on this call, and they now want to go talk to a Mitch. What are you advising them?
Sure. I think start with a quick win, which is around visibility, right? So ask how are they taking in any work requests, right? Are they buried in emails? Are they in multiple mailboxes? Just that kind of starting point, but then also the status updates, right? So how do people follow up on status? Are you getting inundated with where's my stuff? Where's my, when should I expect this? How much time is your team spending on providing those status updates and creating these PowerPoints and these reports, and just kind of all of that side work? Just starting with those and picking at those can really uncover some great opportunity. And it's, not IT language, it's just asking them how they work. And that can definitely give you an easy starting point.
Well, I love the simplification of that question. I mean, it's something that we all ask each other when we used to go to parties, right? What do you do for a living? How do you do for your work? And it's just a great way to get started with this. So I want to thank Mitch, Kathy, Ian for being my panelists today. We're going to get to some questions, but for everybody who's been here, thank you for participating in our session around enterprise service management. I want to leave you with 3 takeaways. First is simplify work intake, particularly now with hybrid working, and let teams decide, whether they're going to be Agile or Scrum or Kanban or take service desk tickets, but at least start with the work to intake. Then use tools like Confluence. It's a wiki-like tool to standard and simplify your communications. Things like how you're sharing your operating procedures, what are your standards, but also how other departments should work with you. And then look at this as an opportunity to rapidly deploy multi-department workflows. This can be strategic, like onboarding ideas, or this could be highly tactical, very episodic. We need to get something built very quickly because hybrid working is changing the way we're working. So 3 things that you can take away from this conversation. I want you to also know where you can learn more about enterprise service management from ISO's technology. So if you want to see a case study, an example of this using Jira Service Management at a health engagement company, please visit that URL, isostech.com/health-engagement-case study, and you'll get to see a lot more detail about a health company doing this. And then we have a number of blog posts around enterprise service management. Hint, I wrote one of those. And so visit isostech.com/blog-ESM, and we will be able to send you a convenient link. You'll get to a convenient link around those particular blog posts about this subject. I think we have time for at least one question. Mitch, this one is for you. And, we've been talking about collaboration and process. Somebody is asking about KPIs, right, in the marketing department that you track through the Atlassian tools. Can you give us maybe 1 or 2 quickly that you are tracking?
Yeah, we 2 things, and it seems very simple, but we are now able, because of our Atlassian install, to track inputs and outputs. We know exactly what's being asked of us and exactly what we're outputting. And in our prior systems, we could not do that without a massive amount of data gathering, and the data was very noisy. And now it's literally, we know exactly moment to moment what's being asked of us and what we're putting out. The second thing that we are tracking, and this is new for us, is velocity. And we are, for the first time, we're able to look at how long it takes to make that piece of creative, and that velocity measurement and how the teams are performing, and is something that is just been a game changer for us to understand how long it takes to make an ad, which seems crazy, but is actually a very important thing when you're making tens of of thousands of ads a year.
That's great, Mitch. Ian, there's a great question here, but I don't think we're going to have enough time to answer it. So maybe the person who asked it, we'll do a follow-up with them, and maybe we'll share some more information. The question's really about DevOps, and the Agile team is using Jira software, and the ITSM team is using another tool, and they can't get these things to talk to each other. So I think we're definitely going to have to follow up on that with that question, because that's not a 30-second answer. But great question there. But Kathy, there's a question also here for you around the product roadmap for Jira Service Manager. What can we tell people about what's coming down the road?
Sure. So I'll put in a plug. November 10th is our ITSM World Tour. So we're going to be actually announcing a lot of new stuff there, but all around working more efficiently, having the teams more collaborative, and really streamlining efforts. So more automation, automated responses, just really trying to get everybody on with their day.
Super. Well, we're up at the end of our hour, and this has been a really great conversation. If you do have another question for us, please do send it into ISOS. And I want to thank my panelists, Mitch, Kathy, and Ian, for joining us. Please reach out to ISOS Technology. How can they help? If you have questions around enterprise service management or linking your Agile Jira tools with ITSM tools, they are there to help you. I'm Isaac Sokolic, again, president of Star CIO. It's been great having you on board for this webinar, and I look forward to seeing you again. I'll be on another webinar with ISOS in November. So have a great fall, and we'll talk soon. Have a great day.